Hey people, Duncan here. I'll take a second to talk about chain of events. But first, please subscribe to my channel, like my video, comment in the section below, and hit that bell for notifications. So I want to take a minute and I want to talk about chain of events, here in America specifically. So, here we go. We all know that the 60s was all about drugs, sex, and so-called rock and roll. Okay, this was heavily influenced. It was subverted into us, the Beatles culture. Okay, now what reason and what would that lead to? So in the 70s, you now have Jimmy Carter, who's most known for all the cocaine that came into the country during his years. And then from that, you hear about the opium wars and how basically the government has been bringing in drugs and influencing a drug culture since probably the 60s. Now the chain of events. Now you have a spike in pregnancies. You have a spike in pregnancies. You have a spike in all kinds of different things in America. Drug use, deaths resulting in. You have a spike in all these different problems in America. Now let's take in consideration, what do people on drugs don't do? Well, for one, they typically don't work. And for two, they typically don't vote. Now, if you're willing to put majority of your nation on drugs, okay, so a big chunk of your population gets addicted to drugs. Now, these people are less likely to go to work. Suddenly there's a vast homeless population that pops up. But they're also breeding like crazy. So with it, you then get NAFTA and other agreements that send jobs elsewhere and that create this poverty here in America. Now, when you got no jobs, no money, and a bunch of people addicted to drugs who happen to be homeless, your chances of them voting go way down. Chances of basically the chances of them being productive members of society go way down. But on top of that, you can convince these people that it's okay to abort their children because after all, they're poverty, they're poor, they're on drugs, they're alcoholics. And with all of this agenda, now suddenly you got this population that's basically subverted into believing it's okay to abort your children. So with this, you now have a massive population control agenda going on. You also throw in the birth control agenda. Now you have this massive population control agenda going on in this country. You have a vast population addicted to drugs and alcohol. You have a homeless generation, and the whole outcome leads them to be able to basically do anything. And these people continue pushing on, and then of course they get these sympathizers, so they get more Americans that believe in, hey, I don't want to pay for that unborn child to live on welfare. So they sympathize with abortion, which then passes. And then they use this language like woman's choice, even though that violates gender discrimination laws. And they do this to pass this agenda. And it's all designed to wipe out the American population. Every bit of it. And all of which time, while Americans are becoming addicted, while Americans are no longer voting as often, while they're giving up their rights, while they're giving up their kids, you have these vast illegal population coming in. You have a vast so-called Muslim refugee population coming in. And now, all these people who are fighting for their rights are starting to strip away the Americans' rights. So now you got in a situation where all these subverted individuals are willing to give up rights like their gun rights. They're willing to give up their jobs. They're willing to give up their capitalism so that we can all turn into socialists. And then when you get this money for nothing and this generation that thinks everything should just be handed to them, no longer is work an ethic. Now, when that happens, you have even less chance of people voting with common sense. In fact, they're more likely to vote the opposite direction. So, all of which time, the people who want to vote are the illegals and the so-called Muslims that are coming in here to essentially take your rights. They're showing up to vote. Okay? And that's how a chain of event happens, to where Americans lose their rights and they literally hand them over along with their guns, along with their unborn children, and they hand them over to the government, to illegals, and to these so-called Muslim refugees. And that's how places like Oregon literally fall apart. I see it every day. I walk down the streets here in Oregon every day. With that said, thanks for watching. Peace.